Hey everyone, it's Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Corsair Carbide 678C, and it's more of a kind of silent orientated possible workstation case with a bit of a design edge. So we'll start with just a quick slow scan around the case, and then I will show you all of the details in a moment as we go in and zoom in and focus in and all of that sort of stuff. But it's just so that you can get a slightly better idea about what's going on before I zoom in and start showing you all about the features of the case. So yeah, sadly, we are down on the floor, but it's the only way that I can get a decent look at the top of the case because of the height of my filming table. Anyway, you do get a power, a reset switch, that's a hard drive activity light, two USB 3s in the top, and you also get a USB 3 Gen 2 Type C, and then your headphone and microphone combined. Oh, that's clever. Anyway, the other thing with the top is there is a cover. Now, with the cover, I have got it on there, but there is mesh underneath as well. But the idea would be that you have mesh or the cover, and then the cover does fit nice and flush, and so does the mesh. Now, because they've both got magnets, you can fit both, but then it doesn't really fit very well, and there's not really a great deal of point with it unless you're worried about you losing a part of it. One thing that I can say when we do remove the mesh though is you can see that you've got mounts there for 140mm and 120mm fans. You can also see that there's enough room in there for 320mm fans as well. I am quite pleased to see the fact that the 120mm are offset, which means it's going to give you decent clearance for the motherboard should you want to use radiators in the roof. Around the back of the case, we've got a normal 7-slot layout down here. You've got rooms up here for 120mm and 140mm fans, but you can move them up and down accordingly depending on what your AIO and roof cooling config is like. But you do also get 2 slots here for vertical GPUs that you do get a decent amount of gap down the side of it for those of you out there that may want to run slightly over spec or slightly over thick GPU. So if you've got more than a dual slot GPU, there's enough room here. I think a triple slot GPU may be asking a little bit too much, and you may need to go for a normal aftermarket one that just mounts in here, but you can get, and they are available separately, the Corsair riser cables now should you want to take advantage of this. So there's a good view of the back of the case. I did mention earlier about mounts in the bottom of the case for a radiator, and between the floor and the top of the PSU cover there is 110mm of room, so you could easily get a 60mm radiator in there with a 25mm fan, and there'd be enough room for stuff to breathe. You could easily get a 240 in with a normal 180mm long power supply as well. Again though, I just say it's a bit of a shame that there's not a cover at the front of the case. This hard drive bay here, which houses two 3.5-inch hard drives, but it will do solid state drives as well. In fact, all of these will do solid state drives as well as 3.5-inch drives. You can remove that cage quite easily if you wanted to, and if you did remove that cage, the two hard drive bays that are there could go in these 2 slots. One of the things I will say though is if you weren't buying this case for an all-out kind of hard drive full, do you know what I mean, mentalist sort of build, then there aren't any extra of these covers for if you remove the hard drive bays on the other side. And when I do show you the other side, you'll get a bit of a reason for why that's a bit of a shame. You do then get another 2.5-inch hard drive bays on the back of the motherboard tray. There is acres and acres of room for you to be able to cable tidy everything. You do also get this PWM hub up at the top here, which is kind of nice, but there's loads of places for you to clip cables down, grommets galore, and you can make a really tidy build very easily. Yes, okay, by the power supply there, it isn't exactly tidy, but what we ended up doing was keeping the back side of it tidy up around this section and then putting all the slack down here. But there are literally cable tie down points everywhere, so you can make your life really easy with this. And you can see there is a large open section up here for if you did have radiators or AIOs in the roof. And the only thing I would say is it is a shame that these don't have any grommets at all for those of you out there that don't end up using them. And again, when we look on the other side, I'm going to leave the back panel off so you'll get a chance to be able to see straight through at that. The only thing that they have got in their favour is you obviously do have the case on the other side, but on the back of the back panel there is more of the sound deadening, so you're going to end up with a black look anyway. In case you're wondering what the cutout here is, it's where the solid states sit, just on here, because they sit a little bit too close to the back of the case. Does make you wonder whether the sound deadening wasn't meant to have been there in the first place, or whether the solid state drives were added afterwards. But clearly they weren't both there at the beginning when they designed the case. Now, lovely big tempered glass side panel with a black border. Now, one of the things I will say with the tempered glass side panels, the magnets are really good, so it is actually quite a bit of effort to get it off. And also, when you do try and lift it off at the back, it's incredibly stiff. So mine takes a bit of, I think it will loosen up. It's just that the hinges at the back are a little bit tight at the moment and it needs a bit of freeing up. Now, what I did say to you earlier on was about the covers here. Now, the two covers, this is how it comes in its standard layout. Now, this obviously makes a lot of sense because of GPUs and stuff. With our motherboard, it puts the GPU one slot further down, otherwise it would sit up perfectly in line with these. Now, the hard drive cages can be configured as you see fit. You can move them up, down, and take them out if you want as well. But if you take them out, then what you get left with, and I'm just removing the plastic covers so that you can see, but if you take them out, what you get left with is just holes in the background. And I don't think that's very nice. You do not get any spare covers, you only get the two, and I think there should have been enough covers in the box to have been able to have covered all of those slots, because there's so much water cooling opportunities with this. You've got a 240 in the 240 or 280 in the bottom, you've got a 360 easily in the top. You could, if you wanted, because of the distances between the two, you could, obviously you've got to remove the optical bay, but you could put a 360mm radiator in the roof, and it'll be off center as well. So you could run a 60mm one easily and still get past your memory and your VRMs and all that sort of stuff. But then you could then also, because of the distance, you could run a 360mm radiator in the front. And if you're going to go down that route, you wouldn't be able to use those hard drive cages. And that's the other thing that I need to stress here. If you put a radiator in the front of the case, you can't use those hard drive cages, or you've got to know that you're not going to be able to run a very thick radiator, because there literally is not a great deal of room there at all. You could put a 30mm thick one there if you wanted. Now, I know I am stressing on the fact of water cooling and radiators and all that sort of stuff, and a lot of people are going to see the hard drive side of this as being a bonus, and I would agree. But if the hard drive side of it was the bonus, why not send it with all of the bays populated so that you could get a full 8 hard drives in there, like a lot of the competition? And I don't then see why it wouldn't have been a problem to have had all 8 bays being able to be populated, but then still coming with covers. But you then have to go on the Corsair website and try and buy them separately, which is just a faff, because you can never get them locally and you have to buy it from them direct. And I just think, for the sake of a few quid and those being in the box, I think it should have just been included. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but obviously it's just about making life easy. And the other thing that I don't like is, even if you did just want to use those bottom 2 hard drive cages, but remove those 2, or the opposite way around, there's no spares. And surely, you know, no one's just going to fill all of those straight away, especially with all of the SSD mounts and everything in the other side, there's loads of options there. And with a slight angle change, I'll then show you the gap at the front of the case. There is no cover for that at all. So if you're not going to be running a big radiator or anything in the front, that is just what you've got to contend with the whole time. And it's something that I've been saying for a couple of years with other brands, and other brands have kind of caught up. But I don't like that big open section at the front. If you didn't want it, you should be able to just have a matching amount of, you know, this kind of design followed to the front of the case, even if it meant that you had to screw it into the front of the case and there was extra clips or something there. But it should really have been there, and it just then would have cleaned up that top section for those of you out there that might have just run hard drives, or those of you out there that weren't really that fussed and wanted to close that section up and just have a couple of fans in the front and an AIO in the roof. Either way, it would have been nice if it could have been covered, and it's slight details like that that I didn't particularly expect Corsair to be missing out on. Talking about details, there was something that I spotted which is on the other side of the motherboard tray. Now, it's on the other side of the motherboard tray, so you can't see the ones that are there, but you can still pick up the grommets that are there, there and there. And if you're wondering what I'm on about, I'll show you the bit of B-roll that I shot. And essentially there are some rivets there, and the powder coat or whatever they've coated the case with, I'm pretty sure it's powder coat, it's literally just reacted and it's just popping off and chipping off. It's not scratched, it's literally just not stuck to the back of the rivets. Now, like I said, it's not everywhere in the case, it's only on those ones, and in reality it's really just the ones in the front section over here that you can now see. But it was just something I didn't particularly expect from Corsair, and it just shows some pretty shoddy quality control on these parts of the case. And if I'd have bought the case, obviously it didn't have the motherboard in at the time, but if I'd have seen that, I think I would have been pretty upset when they're asking £189 for this case. Now, you've got 60mm of room in total above the very top of the motherboard to the top of the case for kind of radiator space. But because the 120mm are very, very offset, it means it's going to miss the bulk of memory modules. So if you played it safe and used something like an LPX module and you haven't got any massive MOSFET heat sinks on the top of your motherboard, you should clear it all fine, and you would be able to run a bigger radiator in push-pull. And it's those kind of little design cues that make me think that this has a dual use, and it's not just for like a workstation with loads of hard drives, but if you can get some big water cooling in it like that, it then makes me think that it's a little bit kind of like short-sighted to have then not given the covers and make things easier for people that might want to use this as a silent or a more quiet, I should say, gaming case. So then I'm back to not liking those covers again, and I'm also back to not liking that girt hole in the front. If you did go water cooling and put a radiator in the bottom, it's a kind of strange config, but it's an option there that you can do. You can see that there's plenty of cutouts across the top of the power supply cover, and there's enough cutouts at the top of the power supply cover that you can mount your power supply the other way around if you want, and have the power supply drawing its air through here and then pushing it out the back. Power supply technology has moved on in leaps and bounds over the last few years, so the fans hardly ever spin in reality. So with the power supply that we're running here today, which is the RM850X, you could easily run it this way round, and with a lot of configs, the fan might never spin anyway. So it doesn't particularly matter, and it's just going to come down to your personal preference. But in this config, with the mesh and the way it's mounted now, if you have it that way round, you don't have to look at the ugly specification sticker on it. So it's just going to come down to what you want to do. If you did want to go with an air cooler, you can see that we've got a 120mm model here with loads of room, but because there's a 140mm fan in the back, you can easily see that you could have a 140mm air cooler in there as well. So there's a fair bit of room for those of you out there running air cooling. But one of the things I will say is the white design with the NVIDIA reference kind of card look there, I think it all fits in kind of well. We are using the Corsair braided combs, braided cable combs that you can see that have made it kind of look a little bit nicer, keeps everything kind of tidy. And then there are some other cables that you can get from Corsair now available separately for like USB 3, your front panel switches and all that sort of stuff. Even USB 2 you can go and get just to make things all tie in and look kind of nice. But I obviously have tried to make this look, you know, the hardware look as nice as possible and like it's going to match, rather than that it has been just chucked in there to give you guys at home some kind of idea what this may look with your build in it. But don't forget, this is the white one and there is the black one still anyway. Having a look at it on the desk itself, one of the things that I would say is it feels a bit dark. If you're going to buy a white case like this, I'd assume that a lot of you are just going to end up putting white LEDs and that sort of stuff in. And it would suit it really well if you could get some decent light in there, because it does feel a little bit kind of shadowy, and it's really only the white cables and the white air cooler that I've got on it really kind of making the inside pop a bit. You can easily see the lights from behind the motherboard on the Prime that I'm using, which kind of does add a little bit of nice colour in there, but there's no lights in there, there's no you know, lit fans or anything like that. It's going to depend what sort of thing that you want anyway. But then once you put the side panel back on, it goes very dark anyway. So that's another reason why I was saying that it might need a little bit more light in there. So I move the mouse out of the way. Might need a little bit more light in there just so that you can get the best from it. But then it's going to depend on the rig and what you want to do with it. Looking at it from a more user perspective angle, this is a 1.5 meter wide desk with an 80mm depth. Now if I was to bring you round here, just carrying the camera, you can see that we've got a fair bit of room around the back of the case, but you do kind of need it. If you had a normal 60mm deep IKEA sort of size desk, the case would be butted right up against the wall. So it's kind of the thought that you would want a slightly, a case desk with a bit more depth. But the rest of it kind of works. So that's a 27-inch monitor in the middle. It does look kind of dwarfed, and that gives you a kind of idea of the sort of sizes with this case as well. Right, so I'm going to be honest, and right from the moment I saw those rivets, and obviously that was when I first got the case, it kind of put me on a bit of a downer. But when you think about it, if you had bought this and spent £180 of your own money on it, maybe bought other bits to go with it, and you're all kind of excited, and then when you go to put it together, you see those kind of things, I think it might affect you in the same sort of way, and then it kind of just ricocheted on. When I saw the covers for the hard drive mounts, I then instantly went looking in the packaging to find the other ones, and it was like, please be there, they're not there. And it was like, well, what happens if I don't want to fill it full of mechanical hard drives? What happens if I'm lucky and I've got a couple of nice solid state drives, or I prefer a really quiet rig? And that's why I've bought a quiet case, and I don't want mechanicals in there, and I know I've got, you know, I've saved up and I've done, you know, done extra jobs, and I've bought a couple of solid state drives, and I do want it to be literally utterly, well, as quiet as I possibly can do, and I know mechanicals are going to be noisy, and those covers just aren't there. And then I go onto the Corsair website and I find that it's going to take them ages for them to get me, or they've not even listed them as spare parts yet. It would frustrate me, and it would wind me up. And I think when you consider the fact that it's got the offset mounts for the water cooling in the roof, you've got the water cooling options in the bottom, obviously water cooling in the front, they were trying to give people lots of options. So with all of those nice options, why didn't you have the options to cover the hard drive bays up? Why didn't you also have the options to cover the rest of the power supply cover at the front up as well? For those of you that might not want to run a big radiator in the front, and you just want some nice clean lines. And I'm a bit surprised because, let's talk frankly, okay? This case is pretty much based on what Fractal have been doing with the R series, like the R3, 4, 5, 6 for years, and that's making a quiet case, put a bit of design flair in it. Yes, okay, we've got like tempered glass windows and stuff on that now, but it's always been around that kind of quiet theme, and then options with hard drives. But like the Fractal, for example, if you don't want all the hard drives in it, you can move an entire plate over, and then there's another plate that you can put in so that the hard drive, so that the power supply cover is just completely smooth. And all I've said that they needed with this was a few plastic covers. So they didn't have none of this kind of like transforming, move stuff around, essentially have like 2 or 3 different sort of cases in one, being able to move stuff. No, but they didn't put the plastic covers in. And I know I'm getting really kind of old woman and moaning about it, but it's such a simple thing that it just feels like it's something Corsair should have, and probably in the past would have done. And with the quality control on the rivets and the other bits and bobs, it just feels a bit lazy. And then just to top it off, you start it up and your all white case has just got blue LEDs. I mean, it's just like, why? So yeah, I don't like it. And I did, when I first saw pictures, I actually liked it. And I was like, oh, you could do that with it. You could do that with it. Surely you're going to be able to do this. Just feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. And yet again, the fractal is still on top. And the camera went unfocused then. So I'll do it again, just for cause and effect. If you were looking at this, go and have a look at the R6, because I think it will tick a lot of boxes. And unless you need the badge on the front, the fractal's cheaper as well.